What if I told you that I've discovered the secret to a longer life? The secret to more productive, more creative, more inspiring, more successful life? And what if I told you that I have the ability to improve your job prospects, maybe finding that dream job? And for some of you, I met some of you earlier, maybe even your romantic prospects, right? What if I told you I could lower your risk for obesity, strokes, Alzheimer's? Whatever it is, I'm pretty sure I can help. And what if I told you all of this requires only that you embrace a philosophy that I'm going to share with you today? This most simple presentation you'll hear today. There's very little science, but I believe it can change your life. All it requires is that you pay better attention, that you sit back and give a high five or a hug occasionally, and that you enjoy a sloppy Joe or a potato salad or my favorite Scotcheroo bars. 13 years ago, I left a career in politics, one that I had built since childhood, asking myself the question, what if? My hope was to add more meaning to my life and to the lives of those around me. During that transition, I read 100 books on business, trying to find the secret to success. That didn't work. I joined an online self-help group, downloaded a meditation app, and saw a therapist to try to find the secret to happiness, and that wasn't terribly successful. I lost 100 pounds twice to try to be more healthy, and that fell through too. The secret to happiness, health, and success has always been there. It's been there since the beginning of mankind and womankind. It makes you a little curious, right? But before we jump into what exactly that solution is, I think it's important to discuss exactly what it is that we're fighting. Now, I was told early on, as I prepared for this presentation, that every good TED Talk has a neuroscientist, right? You listen to them online. Every breakthrough TED Talk has a neuroscientist. And even at risk of being cliche, I have one of those as well. My neuroscientist, smiley up here, is Justin. Now, to be precise, Justin Smith, PhD. He requires the PhD. A couple years back, we started a conversation. I was really curious about how human connection develops, how networks, what they look like, how the brain impacts it, how the brain's chemistry gets involved. Justin and I started this conversation. The first thing we did, the first step we took, is to map the region. Now, what you're looking at is small towns, big towns in the states of South Dakota, North Dakota, and Minnesota. You're looking at creatives and community builders with self-reported data showing who they find to be the most influential in their network. Near the center, where you see the brighter spots, you're seeing dense, connected individuals. And near the edges, you're seeing people that are remote, some of them completely alone, disconnected. The more interesting to me than these areas of connection, though, are the areas of disconnection. And you'll see those at the periphery. I knew that in neural cases, that a break in the neural pathways could be catastrophic. But I was really wondering what it would look like if those relationship pathways, if those connections that are meaningful to us, often emotional, were broken, would they be the same? And further, were there examples of this in nature, where social isolation and disconnection impacted animals? And the answer is yes. It was abundant research, actually. Fruit flies, bats, rats, cats, rabbits, probably turtles. I didn't find that research, but just about any animal you can imagine saw an increased stress and a decreased health if they were socially isolated. You're probably wondering, as a room full of humans, if it impacted humans as well. And the answer is yes. Yes. Stress was increased, exercise negated, sleep deprived or disrupted. Generally, your immune system was undermined. In almost every way, it was total. This disease of disconnection was total. There's even some research that's a little controversial that says we outsource a lot of our knowledge and intelligence, the kind of intelligence developed or measured by IQ, that some of that is outsourced into our network. And it brought to mind something from 10 years ago. It was the week that my grandfather passed away. Now, it was a grief-filled time for all of us. He was the center of our family, the center of our network in many real ways. But it was something my grandmother said that really affected me. She wandered around the hallway, no doubt in a kind of fog of grief and confusion, But she kept repeating something. She kept saying, I feel like I've lost my mind. I feel like I've lost my mind, she said. And the science tells us that in some very real ways, those experiences, the knowledge, the wisdom that she had entrusted to my grandfather had in fact been lost through his death and ultimately through his disconnection. The disease that underlies all of these ailments, that addresses all of these potentials for depression and addiction, is the disease of disconnection. And scientists like Justin, because they are so focused on specific problems, weren't seeing the bigger picture. They're only treating the symptoms. So you're asking, Hugh, is this lack of friends a big deal? It's just a phase. I'll find friends. Is it really a big deal? And the answer is yes. But I think it's even gotten worse over the last 15 years. Over the last 15 years, a multi-billion-dollar industry has developed. And that industry has two purposes. It's to tell us, don't worry about disconnection as a disease. And the other is to say, our solutions cure it. Our solutions connect us. Our solutions make the world smaller. Social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, tell us over and over again that we're more connected than we've ever been. Some ways that's true, right? In some ways that's true, but in deeper, more meaningful ways, it is entirely and utterly false. Raise your hand for me. Raise them high when we do this, because I got to see you through the lights. Does anyone remember birthdays as a child? Right? You would gather together with family and friends. It felt good to be known, loved, seen, trusted, right? Maybe there was a little blip. You got a little bit of rush. Justin Smith would tell us that there were hormonal and physiological benefits to those interactions. That by seeing people we recognized and trusted, people that we had emotional relationships, we actually were getting a sustainable rush of chemicals in our bodies and brains telling us that it was important. Now imagine your current birthday. How many of us received texts or Facebook messages, right? Keep them up. How many of us received over a dozen of those, right? Maybe hundreds of Facebook messages, some of us. What we know is that digital hugs and high fives simply do not work. At best, it's short term, a little bit like taking a hit of crack. And at worst, it is utterly, completely near meaningless to our bodies. There's something more here that's important. Digital entities, digital platforms confuse our brain. In an evolutionary way, at a most basic sense, our brains are meant to observe through our senses. They're meant to determine risk or potentially reward and to react. What they're not built to do, on a scientific level, what they're not built to do is discern between what's real and what's not. Our brains aren't meant to decide what's actual and what's virtual. So the challenge becomes, especially as immersive VR, virtual reality, becomes part of our lives, as the internet and our phones become ever present, is to discern those for ourselves. That disease of connection does have a solution, though, and I'm extremely excited to share with you. Are you guys ready to hear it? Maybe? It's early. Are you ready to hear the solution to all that ails you? Right. Okay. Potlucks. No, I'm serious. Potlucks. Right? There's a guy, Dan's in the back. Dan, did you hear it? It's potlucks, right? Potlucks are the solution in some very, very, very real ways. Because as we saw over time, the relationships that were part of family, we progressed. We went further and further and further from our home base. We got to that place where the relationships between cousins and old neighbors weakened, and we really just atrophied as a group of people. This disease hit a crisis point recently in the last couple years in my hometown of Milbank. So Milbank's a nice community. It's about 3,000 people. We did a survey of current and past residents and visitors. And what we found is a profound state of disconnection. Disconnection from each other, disconnection from community, disconnection from a bigger purpose and a shared story. We knew we had to do something, and I thought the best path was perhaps go back to the basics. This idea of coming together, eating, celebrating, having conversations used to be instinctual. We did it some ways out of necessity and some ways out of just pattern, but now it needs to be strategic. And thus was born the potluck strategy, right? So 2 pieces of research underlie the potluck strategy, something that I've done over the past 5 years that I plan to do over the next several years. The first piece of information comes from 2 academics, Nick Christakis and James Fowler. They wrote a fantastic book called Connection. So it's been long accepted that the people closest around us, those that we would call our friends or our family, influence our actions and behaviors on everything from our likelihood to gain weight, to stop smoking, to be altruistic, to take a creative risk. These people impact us. But what Christakis and Fowler found is that those impacts don't stop there. Those ripples go throughout our network, reaching not only our friends, but our friends' friends and our friends' friends' friends. People we may never know, names we may never know, have an impact on us and we on them. Piece of research number 2 comes from Robin Dunbar. Robin is a psychologist and sociologist from the UK who identified a correlation between the size of our brains and the size of our social groups. Throughout history, militarily, societally, tribally, generally those groups maxed out around 120 to 150 people. This was the amount of people that you could know. You could know their birthdays, if they had children, what their flaws and foibles were. These were meaningful, sustainable relationships. So if we bring these things together, if we bring together these 2 pieces of research, and we think about the fact that we have 120 friends, and those 120 friends have 120 friends, and those 120 friends of friends have 120 friends, our impacts, measurable, scientifically provable, reach 1.728 million people. Every action I take, if you see me treat someone poorly out here, your wife's best friend is likely to treat people more poorly. If I share that I've recently been juicing, that same best friend is going to engage a healthier lifestyle. We know this to be the fact when we consider these things together. So what does it mean? What's the actual strategy? It's 4 steps, 4 important steps, things to consider, starting with observation. So many believe they have the lack of connections to transform. We think that that's something that comes through elected office or wealth or privilege. But we all exist within a network of 150 people. So many people have failed to explore the invisible threads of relationship that extend well beyond us. We don't pay attention, we don't explore, we don't consider. We've lost those childlike curiosities. We've lost that desire to ask questions and to look at the things around us because it's not efficient and it's not simple. As a result, we limit what is possible in our world and what is possible in our network. But if we believe in the 150 idea, if we believe in the fact that we have 3 layers and 3 degrees of influence, then we need to identify who those people are. Not trust social media to tell us we have thousands of friends, but actually identify who our 150 are and name them. A great way to engage the step of observation is to ask ourselves, who are the 3 people most influential to my life and work? Or perhaps aspirationally is to ask ourselves, which people or organizations, if I was to connect with them today, would transform my life and work? Observation. Second stage is invitation. So invitation creates a space for mutuality and reciprocity, which is a critical component of connection and relationship. Most of us recall the thrill of receiving a birthday invitation from a classmate or maybe extending one of our own. We expend a great deal of money and time in creating graduation and wedding and milestone event invitations. But the act of invitation is often looked, and we leave virtually no room for reciprocity, no room for response. Invitations at their basic level are an intentionality around what we're asking for. I'd like you to show up at this time for this purpose. But we rarely consider the second aspect of that, which is the RSVP. RSVPs are important. Reciprocity is important because there's a really good chance that friend is going to say yes. When you extend that high five, there's a really good chance that there's going to be a high five waiting for you. But there's also the possibility that it could be no. There's also the possibility that the connection isn't desired on the other end. We live in a world right now where with the click of a button, we can declare friends to the world without them having even to acknowledge that we're friends indeed. This idea of invitation is an important one, and one that I want you to consider because it has to be active, it has to be engaged, and it has to be intentional. So the question to ask in this, the spark in this, the place to start in this is to ask, who can I invite today? Who can I take for coffee? Who are those 3 people that influence me most can I make a telephone call to? Who are those 3 people that I would like to meet? Can I drop a line to and ask for time in person? The third step is conversation. Conversation creates space for openness and change. The desire to connect is based in communication and conversation. Often a lack of prep leads us to a superficial place. Because we haven't prepared, we ask questions like, what do you do? Where are you from? How about this weather? Wasn't that rain something, right? Or worse, that lack of preparation requires us or leads us to sit at a table of people, maybe even people we like, respect, and love, and to simply wait for our time to tell the story, our story. We're not listening to the stories other people are telling. Have you ever been in one of those tables, one of those conversations where everyone's kind of just leaning in because they want to jump in? They haven't actually heard what anyone else has said. That's a lack of preparation more than anything. I encourage a proactive set of thoughts of thinking about a signature question, which sounds crazy, right? We shouldn't need a question to spark conversation. But especially in social events like this, the opportunity to have something to spark that is critical. What are you going to ask someone over lunch? Maybe ask them what you're passionate about. What are you curious about? What do you think about the talks this morning? What are you taking away? What will you apply to your life? Open-ended questions that require thought from the person being asked and that carry a commitment that you'll actually listen to the response. Ask yourself, what am I curious about? What can I ask 1,000 people and still care about the answers I'm giving? Is a great way to engage conversation from a starting point. And the final piece is celebration, which leaves the room for gratitude and my favorite word, possibility. Rituals and practice as human beings are formed around the idea of celebration. Birth and death, the seasons, the harvest, the rising and setting of the sun. When did you last celebrate a day well lived? When did you last have a friend come to visit and you literally celebrated? You literally were overjoyed by their return or their presence or the exciting news that they had to share to you. Unless cultural practice includes celebration, communities forget what they value. They forget what makes them unique. And we hear this. I drive around the state a lot. And you go to that guy at the cash register at the gas station and you ask him about Millbank. He's going to say a couple things. He's going to either talk in generalities and say, we've got nice parks, we've got good schools, we're generally safe, or ultimately a lot of places are going to be negative. And they're going to say, we're losing population, we're losing young people, we're losing possibility. Unless we think in terms of daily celebration of events, occurrences, just getting through the day together, we'll lose those things that we know make us better, that come from a place of celebration. Celebration reintroduces wonder and awe into our world. It inspires us to think and commit and recommit to the possibilities that exist beyond us. Ask yourself, what am I grateful for in this community today, in this room today, in my family today? I'm grateful for you. I really am. I'm grateful for this, the exchange of ideas, a place to break bread and have conversation. I believe so deeply in you, even not knowing you, in community, your community, even not knowing your community well. I believe so deeply in this that I'm committing the next decade of my life to hosting potlucks, right? Graduate degrees, I've elected presidents, I'm hosting potlucks. Mom's proud. They won't always look the same. Sometimes they'll look a little more like barbecues, sometimes there'll be tacos involved. It's hard to tell what they'll look like, but they will include a couple things. There's so much that can disconnect us right now. Our politics, our faith, our gender, our race. But there are so many better things that connect us. Happier families, life's well lived, shared commitment to just the basics of our humanity. I'm going to host a potluck. Maybe tomorrow night at my house. If you bring the potato salad, I'll be sure to bring the scotcheroo bars. Thank you. Thank you.